SEP Fanfic Readings presents 5 Days by RavieSnake. Chapter 9. Day 3. Night. Hermione jerked awake at the feeling of something brushing against her arm and blinked rapidly. She lifted her head and her eyes crossed at the blackness that she met. "Shite," she said woozily as she quickly re-lowered her head and started to lift her knees to bend her legs. "Draco, how long did you let me sleep for?" There was no answer. "Draco," she said, turning her head towards where his lay on her shoulder. Something brushed by her arm again, and she whimpered, "The bats are coming." Draco still didn't respond. "Draco! Malfoy, wake up!" she screamed in panic, shrugging her shoulder harshly. "Malfoy!" When he still didn't wake, she kneed and punched at him frantically, ignoring the flapping and screeching of the increasing number of bats coming up around them. "Oh, gods! Wake up! Wake up!" "Ugh," came Draco's hoarse moan as he rolled his head back. "Granger, what the fuck?" Hermione burst into relieved tears. Draco blinked furiously to try and understand what was happening. "Granger, what's... A bat hit him in the side of the face, and he jerked his head away from it, and then quickly hit his nose in Hermione's neck. "You woke me up for bats!" he yelled angrily to her. "No!" she cried, pressing her face into the side of his neck. We both..." "I can't hear you!" Draco shouted back as the noise from the bats rose in volume. Hermione's hand fumbled around at their sides until it found his hand, and she gripped it. His fingers tightened around hers as the swarm grew. "Nasty little bastards," Draco grumbled when the bats had finally dispersed. He lifted his head, but quickly lowered it again with a pained groan. "Holy fuck, I feel like shit." "Pump your legs and go back to sleep," Hermione said in a detached voice. Draco groaned again as he complied with her order to move his legs. "How much time do I have left on my term?" he asked. "Just sleep. I'll wake you every so often to kick." "Every so often?" he inquired, even as he closed his eyes. Hermione released his hand and rubbed at her face. "I won't be sleeping any more," she replied. "Go to sleep." Draco opened his eyes and rolled his head to the side on her shoulder. "What are you on about? We take turns." "Just go to sleep," she commanded him again. Draco slowly lifted his head and glared in her direction. "You need sleep," he insisted angrily. Hermione shook her head, even though he couldn't see the action. "I can't take the risk. You're only going to get weaker." Draco made an annoyed noise. "I'm still..." "You fell asleep on your watch," she interrupted him flatly. "The bats woke me up, and you were asleep. You're getting weaker, and I can't. If we're going to live longer than tonight, I need to stay awake, and you need to rest." A short silence followed as Draco let his head drop back down with a puff of strained breath. "I didn't mean to fall asleep," he started apologetically. Hermione exhaled deeply. "I know you didn't, and that's exactly why I'll be staying awake until someone finds us." Draco made a sad hum. "We'll be beyond the veil long before someone finds us," he whispered. "Maybe," she acceded. "Or maybe Mundungus will come out here today looking for plants to sell for himself and see our stuff and alert someone. Or maybe hikers will pass by. Or hunters. Maybe the Oars will decide to screen the area early." "It's a nice thought, Granger, but we both know it won't happen." Hermione sighed as she began stroking his hair. "Yeah." She bent her neck to place a kiss to his temple, and then closed her eyes at the way his skin nearly seared her lips. "Your temperature's gone up," she noted quietly. "Hopefully it's enough to keep you warm tonight," came Draco's reply, his hand sliding up under her shirt to splay against her skin at her waist. "I don't think I can manage a spell anymore." Hermione hummed appreciatively at the heat from his palm, and then maneuvered her head to rest her cheek against his clammy forehead. "You should sleep," she suggested once more. Draco shook his head lightly under hers. "I should." He puffed out a loud breath and nudged his head at hers to indicate he wanted to lift it. She pulled back and he raised his head. He kissed her cheek and then tilted his face up to the sky. "That's too bad," he said. "What?" Hermione inquired, her hands still in his hair. Draco squinted into the vast darkness above. It would have been nice to see the stars one last time. Hermione looked up as well to see the strip of black mat that was the overcast night sky. Perhaps it'll be clear tomorrow night, she said. Draco snorted. That'd be my luck. It'll clear up once I'm dead. Hermione lowered her hand and rubbed comfortably at his arm. You'll still be alive tomorrow night. Doesn't feel like it, he replied with a pained grunt as he lowered his head once more. The grunt turned into a low growl that increased in volume as he gritted his teeth and pressed his forehead to her shoulder. Draco? Hermione started in a concerned voice. Draco merely growled louder and pulled his free hand away from her to slap it harshly against the rough stone wall. Fuck! He suddenly shouted, slamming his palm repeatedly into the rock. Fuck, fuck, fuck! Draco! The pain, he choked, his nails clawing at the wall beside her head. Fucking hell, Fuck, I just want it to stop already. Hermione cringed to herself at his desperate tone. Maybe if you tried to go back to sleep. You gotta pull my arm down, he nearly begged. What? Pull your arm down? She inquired warily. My stuck arm, he ground out, nodding his head into her shoulder. You have to yank it free or something. I can barely stand it anymore. Hermione turned her head in the direction of his trapped arm and stared at the dark. I don't think that's a good idea. Freeing it might make it hurt worse. Draco began taking in huge, puffing breaths in what appeared to be an attempt to overcome the pain. You're going to make yourself hyperventilate. Stop, warned Hermione sternly. He shook his head again. I'm going to be sick, he moaned. Just relax. You need to calm down. Draco let out another long, shaky breath. Yeah. Hermione ran her hand in soothing circles over his tense shoulders. You're okay, she tried to comfort. I'm not, he disagreed at once. I'm fucking dying, Granger. Another pained groan echoed in his chest before he added, and it's hell. Silence followed his statement for several minutes, Hermione continuing to rub at him until she finally spoke again. Someone will find us, she whispered. Someone will come and get us out. We'll get you better. Draco replied with a sad, raspy chuckle. That's not going to come true just because you keep saying it. I know, she said, but it hurts too much to think of the alternative. Draco was quiet a moment. I always wondered when it happened, he said then. Hermione tilted her curious face down toward his. When what would happen? She inquired softly. When I'd get what was coming to me, he answered shakily. Hermione's hand stilled on his upper arm. You don't deserve this. Draco let his hand fall away from the wall to rest it on her hip again. How many times have I called you mudblood? 100 times? 1,000? He challenged her, his fingers gripping at her side. She shook her head. That doesn't matter. How many lives did I endanger leading up to the war? He cut her off. How many times was I a witness to evil and did nothing? The questions hung in the stale air, and Hermione dropped her hand from his arm. You don't deserve this, she simply repeated. Draco began to lift his head to retort again, and quickly lowered it down with another moan. I think I really am going to be sick, he said before gagging. No, Hermione pleaded frantically, their conversation immediately abandoned. You'll dehydrate too quickly. Draco, you have to try and keep it down. The sound of Draco's erratic breathing was loud in the crevice as he tried to calm himself through the bout of nausea. Hermione brought her hand up once again and lightly massaged the back of his neck. You're okay, she cooed. You've got this. You're okay. He continued to lean on her and focus on his breathing for several minutes until he finally relaxed and slowly lifted his head. Well, that was unpleasant, he said wryly, tricking a soft laugh out of Hermione. You're not supposed to be making me laugh, she mock-scolded him, setting her hand at his waist. I like the sound of your laugh, he admitted, resting his head back on the wall. Hermione couldn't help the smile that resulted at the comment. Laughter is good medicine, she said. Draco hummed as he closed his eyes. It'll take a bit more than laughter to rid me of this, I'm afraid. Fuck. I've never felt so bloody awful in all my life." "I'm so sorry," said Hermione, her smile fading. "How can a person feel starved and nauseous at the same time?" he grumbled. "How can a head feel like it's full of lead and hot air at the same time?" He tried to flex his left hand and let out a pained gasp. And how in the fuck can an arm be numb and excruciatingly painful at the same fucking time? His short rant was halted when he suddenly gagged again. Hermione grimaced to herself as she listened to him fight off the urge to vomit, and when he finally settled again a minute later, she felt for his hand at her hip, and she squeezed it. "I'm sorry you feel so wretched," she stated sincerely. "I wish I could do something for you." "Maybe. Could you just try distracting me?" he requested. "What would you like to talk about?" she offered right away. "I'd suggest snogging, but given your current state—" Draco chuckled that time. "No, snogging's out." He was quiet as he thought a moment. "Sing me something." Hermione hesitated. I'm really not all that good at singing," she admitted quietly. Draco opened his eyes and gave her a sad smirk in the darkness. "I won't tell anyone," he said. Hermione smiled weakly at that, but shook her head. I don't know." "Please." His tone was rather pleading, and she sighed. "You'll only poke fun at me." "I won't," he assured seriously. "Never again." Hermione took a deep breath at that. She closed her eyes and bowed her head. There is one song that I used to sing with my mum," she said after a few moments. "It's rather a sad song, though." "Then it will be very fitting," Draco said with a gloomy yet teasing lilt. Hermione nodded. "It's an old song, too, and I remember hearing Mrs. Weasley humming it once, so I don't think it's exclusive to Muggles. You might know it." "You're stalling," he said. "I'm not," she denied lamely. I just don't remember the beginning." Draco gripped at her hand encouragingly. "So start from where you do remember," he said. Hermione was silent as she thought of how to begin. "Go on, then," Draco prodded. "I'm going," she said, her voice a little tight. She took in a deep breath, closed her eyes, and cleared her throat several times, and then finally began softly. "So slowly, slowly she came up," she sang, "and slowly she came nigh him. But all she said when she saw him there, 'Young man, I think you're dying.'" She paused for breath for the next verse, but was taken by surprise when Draco beat her to it, and he began to sing. "He turned his face unto her straight, with deadly sorrow sighing. 'O lovely maid, come pity me, I'm on my deathbed lying.'" Draco's rich tenor hung in the air as a tear tracked down Hermione's cheek. "You know it," she gasped. "Keep going before my nausea comes back," he ordered. She managed a small smile to herself as she took another breath and sang the next verse. They took turns then, singing the entirety of the song, until they came to the last two verses, and they sang together, free hands locked tightly together at their sides. "They buried her in the old churchyard. They buried him beside her, and from his grave grew a red, red rose, and out of hers a briar. They grew and grew up the old church wall, till they could grow no higher, and at the top, twinned in lover's knot, the rose wrapped round the briar." Draco's bottom lip trembled when they finished. You have a beautiful voice," he said, tears welling in his eyes. "You do too," Hermione said, her voice quavering. There was a brief silence before, "I don't want to die, Hermione," Draco suddenly confessed brokenly. Hermione's face contorted with grief at that, and she released a sob. Draco finally let go as well, and they pressed their foreheads together as their sorrowful cries carried into the night.